be awesome.
Okay. So, yeah, regarding this subject then around creativity, basically the way I'm going to go about it is we haven't got long. So I'm going to use a lot of clips. I'm going to try and show you my interpretation of it and what it looks like for me on the grass. Obviously, creativity is very subjective. So what it might mean for me might be different for you and vice versa. So I'm going to show you what it looks like for me on the grass. I'm not going to show you everything. I've got no clips on here for set pieces, just to outline that at the moment. From the offset, I'm not going to go into any theory behind it, other than my definition of creativity is doing something that was unexpected. I know I've seen other definitions which say it's that has to be original, but I think if something's original, it means it hasn't been done before. So, for example, if it was the Cruyff turn, it can't be creative because somebody did it 40 years ago. I don't personally believe in that. I just think it's something that's unexpected and that has some end product to it as well. So I think it has to be effective. It's not it's not something which you're just doing for the sake of it. You're doing something to have an influence on the game. So I'm just going to start with a little exercise, a little icebreaker called What Happened Next. I'm going to show a clip and I'm going to pause it at a point in the clip. And I'm just going to ask you just to yourself, try and guess what happens next. And then I'll play on the clip and then I'll talk through.
Sí, y creo que hay una...
So I'm going to just give you 5 seconds. What do you think happened next? And then it'll just be really interesting to see how close you were to what happened, okay? Okay, so if we take this back to creativity, what I see is outside of the foot pass, a flick round the corner. It's also a wall pass, passing it to somebody and getting it back, and then squaring it for a teammate. And the reason why I think it's an important clip is at this moment here, it's actually, they're well outnumbered, the attacking team. Let me just move this bar down because it's in my way. Okay, so you're looking at sort of 5 against 8. But for us as coaches, hopefully it highlights to us that there are possibilities on the pitch, no matter how organised the opposition is, but we have to be creative as well as obviously the players to help them with these pictures. Next one. What happened next? So this is in the Italian league now. So the first one was Spanish league, a big club. This is a small club, Crotone, against Benevento. What happened next? Okay, and I'll play the clip. There. Okay, so I guess my question would be, how many of you, us, because we're in this together, would coach this? So if our player's in this position, how many of us would encourage that bit of play for that finish? And as we can see, it's not a big club. I don't even know the names of these players, no disrespect to them. So it's available to anybody if they want it. Next clip. Now we've moved on to MLS. What happened next? I must admit, when I first saw this, I thought he was going to chip the keeper. but he does this instead. Nutmeg, and this pass there. Okay, and again, I don't know who the players are. I don't know their level, but what I do know, it's against an organised team, and they have found a way to cut through them. Next clip here. Oops. Apologies. Okay, what happened next? I only get away with showing this clip as someone working for Arsenal because of the person on the ball. Otherwise, I might get in trouble. I call this one the space in the sky. So that scoop there for that finish. So again, here we could be thinking as coaches, it's all blocked. There's no space. We've got. They found a way. Then this last one here is the footage shown okay?
Yeah, it is done. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This one here, I think, is an important clip because the context to start with. So this is a Champions League semi-final. Okay, so a lot of pressure, big game, and yet ball gets played into here. So this player here is 1v1. Good scanning, round the corner pass. Now, again, I'll ask the question for all of us. I'm not asking it directly to you. I'm asking myself this as well. How many of us would coach this bit of play there? And more importantly, if one of our players did this and the defender read it and tackled him, and maybe they counter-attacked and scored, what would we say to this player? And I'll come on to a bit of this in a while. Okay, and I call this a goal made in South America because it's Dybala to Alves to Higuain, and Alves is the right back who receives this, back heel, so it's a double wall pass for that finish. Okay, so for me, lots of good learnings in this goal. Least of all, the context of the game and the high stakes. So I'm going to build the discussion around one slide. Okay, so I've got 10 sort of tips, if you like, for developing creativity. There's many more. I'm not really going to go into today practice design and things like that unless I get asked it at the end, because I think we talk a lot about things like practice design and the theory of creativity. But what I want to focus on today is, what does it look like on the grass? What is it? And what are some of the things that also enable it, but maybe aren't some of the obvious things? So for me, it starts with you, or should I say the coach? Okay, and I've just put a couple of things on here. The first one is your influences and your ethos. So as an example, for me, when I delve into my past and my upbringing, I think the biggest influence on me had nothing to do with football. So I had a cousin who, at the age of 16, got diagnosed with an illness and became paralyzed from the neck down. And basically, he went on to become a painter. He painted with his mouth. He had his own art gallery. His paintings were incredible. So what it taught me, looking back, was if somebody can teach themselves a new skill, never mind the fact that it was painting with their mouth, then anything's possible on a football field. After all, there's 22 players on a big field. So that's always been that probably has always got in the way of me making excuses and trying to find ways for things not to happen. So my motto is nothing is impossible. And my ethos is built around that. My ethos is around there's no limits to what is possible, about being original, about being unique, and finding ways to make things happen. On top of that, as a human being, as a personality, does your character lend itself to tolerating mistakes? Because if you want creativity, mistakes are going to happen. It is going to be messy. it is going to lead to conceding goals. It is going to lead to possession being lost, but the rewards can be very high if you persevere with it. Okay, so but it's not for everybody. Some people's character won't lend itself to this, and your personality might not suit this. Some people see creativity as a mistake and messing up the team rather than opportunity to learn and an opportunity for development. Next, the vision. Okay, so for me, all my coaching work starts with I try to start it with an inspiring vision, and I'll show you an example in a second. And what I think that does is it gives you a framework for improvement. So you know where you want to get to. You've got your processes that are going to help you achieve that. So with the Arsenal under-16s this year, for example, it was one of our vision was about being unplayable. So I could, even if at times we were, you class it unplayable. If you looked at our metrics and the clips, you can always find improvement somewhere, and it stops players from getting complacent and staff. So I think a compelling vision is extremely important, and it helps you to get creativity. Playing principles. So I'm going to go into two things today. I'm going to look at creative defending, and I'm going to look at something I call winning moves. So winning moves being attacking actions, creative defending being defending actions. Individual plans. So what's important about individual plans? First of all, they're personalized. They're about building a connection with the player. So do you know what their dream is? What's their aspiration? Who are their role models? Because once we know that, we can help them with their game. We can build their game and add to their game. I use a brick in the wall analogy, that if a player is a wall and in that wall are, say, 7 bricks are in place when we inherit that player, and our job is just to fill the rest of the wall up with the missing bricks. If one of those bricks is creativity, but then we put into their plan, play 2-touch, for example, or do loads of defending, if they're a number 10, then the chances are they're going to be less creative. So actually what you've done is you've put in a brick, but you've taken away one of the bricks that was there before that made them unique and was one of their strengths. And, you know, we can try to tell ourselves that, well, we're not South American, we're not Spanish, we don't have these types of players. Believe me, we do. You know, my experience is working with England. We've got some of the best players in the world, and we could have even more. So the players are out there. They always have. If we look back from years gone by with Glenn Hoddle and Chris Waddle and Gascoigne and Joe Cole, so Paul Scholes, we've had lots of top players. And, you know, with the investment we've got in youth development in this country, there's no excuses why we shouldn't be the best in the world. So building a connection is important. I've worked with players who say they want to win the Ballon d'Or. For me, that's fantastic. People will say, oh, that's unrealistic. Why is it unrealistic? I've just told you about my cousin. Nothing's unrealistic, provided that you work at it and you don't just expect it to fall in your lap. If a player thinks they're going to win wants to win the Ballon d'Or, and then again, an area like this, you've got fantastic potential, because you can really raise their game and take them to new heights. And I'll show you an example after what I mean by that. Last one's the environment. Okay, what do I mean by that? I mean that when someone's trying to be creative, then I'll give you an example where I remember with Delhi, when he was an under-16, he tried a Cruyff turn on the edge of the box. I remember it was away at Watford. We were winning 1-0, about 5-10 minutes to go. And he got tackled and Watford scored. And he was really upset because Watford were one of our close rivals. And he was upset because he wants to be a top player. He'd be upset even if he wins 5-0 with the character he's got. And they're the sort of ones we all want to work with. And but my job afterwards wasn't to criticise him for the Cruyff turn and say to him, I could have done 2 things. I could have done many things, but in terms of creativity, a mistake would have been, I think, you shouldn't have done that in that area. That's not the area of the pitch to do it. And I know it's a mistake to do that because I could show lots of examples of players doing these things in those areas. And when it works, everyone's clapping their hands. They're not saying, no, you shouldn't have done it. So my job was to ask him afterwards. And what I mean by that is 2 or 3 days later, what were you trying to do? And his answer was, I was trying to do a Cruyff turn. Okay. And we looked at it, and the reason why it didn't work wasn't because it was the wrong decision. It was because he did it too early in the action. He didn't get his body into the player, and he wasn't deceptive enough. And he didn't move the ball quickly enough. Not in terms of passing, but in terms of doing the Cruyff turn action. So there was a few things in terms of the Cruyff turn that weren't executed well. It wasn't the fact that he was doing it. So what I think I've tried to do there is stick to his plan. He wants to be a creative player. Don't tell him he can't do something. Help him achieve that thing. And that requires perseverance and praise in the intent. So well done, good idea. How could you make that work? What could you do differently next time in order to make that action work? And if you do things like that, what you end up doing is, if you work in this way, you uncover hidden talents. What you find is they actually start to do things which they didn't even realize they could do, because you are now demanding creativity in your environment. It's an expectation. And then what they'll do is they'll go on YouTube and they'll look up players and they'll copy and steal and improve what they see out there, as well as what they can gain from us. Because the reason why I showed you those clips at the start, and I purposely picked 5 different leagues, was that not all the answers are in the Premier League. Okay, we can learn from all leagues. And if we want players to be students of the game, then we need to be students of the game ourselves, because we need to role model the right behaviours. So I think that sends out the right message. And what it does as well is it means that we're training our eyes. So if a player ever tries to make excuses, I can turn to them and say, no, you can do X. And if they say, no, you can't, I can just show them a clip of that happening. And not just by 1 player or 2, I can show them multiple, and then show them that I'm going to support that on a match day under pressure, but nowhere near the pressure that Juventus were under when they scored that goal against Monaco. And then at the bottom, I've got blame the players last. That's a motto we use with the under-16s at Arsenal. And what that doesn't mean is you never blame the players. So I don't want this to come across that it's a soft environment. It's a safe environment. And with all the staff that we have nowadays, and with all the, analysis and technology, etc., we think it's important that we look at ourselves first, and we create a culture where once we've explored whether we've done our job, then we can look at the player. And I'll give you an example of this shortly. Before I move on, is there any questions regarding what I've shown so far?
Feel free to use the chat box, guys, if you want.
Should I carry on?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, okay. So, and like this slide here, I'm not saying it's the answer to everything. For the time we've got today, these were the things that I thought were important for the discussion, and also maybe trying to just go about the conversation in a slightly different way, and bring it back to the grass as much as possible. So I mentioned about vision. This was the vision that we had with the England under-16s, who on the right-hand side there, who 12 months later deservedly won the under-17s World Cup. And this was our vision. Okay, so we wanted to show the world that we're unplayable with and without the ball, and that there are no limits to what is possible. We've adopted a similar one with the Arsenal under-16s, and the results are exceptional. Not because I'm a great coach or anything like that. One, fortunate to have good players in this country. If I look on the right-hand side there's people like Jadon Sancho, Ryan Sessegnon, Phil Foden. You know, these are already good players. So I think the first job for us is to make sure that we can bring out their qualities, that we don't restrict them. And then after that, once they feel comfortable in the environment and they can play with freedom, what can we add to their game? How can we make them even better? And that's something which, you know, I think the likes of Guardiola deserve enormous amount of credit. I hear so many people saying that they've never had an opportunity to manage a club like that. But can they honestly say, hand on heart, that they would improve the players like he does? And wherever he's been, at the likes of outwit your opponent, which is a defending principle, which I'll show you now.
Hi, Dan. I think we're
Being
lost.
prepared to defend.
Sorry, I think we're lost
You
a
lost
little
me.
bit there. Yeah.
Do you have me?
Yeah, we've got you good. Thanks.
Yeah. What do you need me to repeat anything?
Yeah, maybe just its last 20 seconds. That should be. If you got a good memory.
Sends out a good message in terms of you want players to be creative. Now, it doesn't mean they can do what they want. There needs to be a lot of work around that in terms of what does that look like in your position, asking the players, and then agreeing on what that looks like on a football pitch. It will look different for a centre back than it will look like for a striker, for example. And of course, it's within a framework. That's what freedom is. You know, any one of you who have got your own children, I'm sure you give them freedom to go and play in the garden, but there's a fence around it. That's the framework. So it's all within a framework. Of course it is. As soon as you give them a formation, there's a framework. These three areas here are defending principles, and I'll show you examples of them now. And they're all linked to creativity and the style of play, which is to dominate possession. So this first clip here is from an under-16 game. Okay, and I'm just looking at this player here, who's the left centre back. Okay, so this is what I would class as outwit your opponent. Okay, so again, I'm looking at this player here. So it's the left centre back. Just going to play this slowly. So as the ball gets played in to the striker now, yeah, if you can see the left centre back now, look at that timing. That's outwitting the centre forward, because the forward thinks, oh, I can get this to feet because he's a bit deep. And then he goes as the ball goes. And there he is. Comes out with the ball and we can play. Here's Otamendi doing it in the World Cup for Argentina. Okay, so if you look at Giroud, the number 9, there, goes to receive. He's checked. Otamendi's deep, and then he's there. And he comes out with the ball. Okay, being prepared to defend 1v1. Okay, here's an example of Bonucci at Juventus. So if you want creative defending, you're going to have to see your players defending these scenarios. Okay, if you look at his body shape, and how he wins the ball with that foot there. So he blocks off one side, but he's able to win the ball on another side. Comes out with the ball again, so they can play. I have got an English player as an example. We started thinking I had something against English players. So Ashley Young. In this scenario here, he is 1 against 2. Okay, watch how he defends this. So while this is happening, why is it creative? Because he's having to problem solve, and you get creativity through problem solving. Backs away, makes it predictable, wins a goal kick. Here's defending 1 against 2 in a central area. Champions League final 2015. Bonucci again. Yep, you're right. I'm a Juve fan. Ball gets played in. You can just see him there. He's just had a look at Messi now. There. So he knows he's there. He knows if he goes towards the ball, Messi's getting slid in. Look how he positions his body. There. Wins the ball. And here's one of a centre forward. So this is winning the ball cleanly. So this is winning the ball and then attacking. So if you watch Suarez here, he's waiting for the ball to get played into the midfielder. And he wins it from behind. So now he goes, waits for his touch, and then watch what he does. Nutmeg outside of the foot. Okay, again, I asked the question, how many of us would coach this outside of the foot shoot? And it went into the keeper's bar. Just a question. Right, I'm going to give you a blame in the player's last example. Okay, so this clip here, I've asked the question, is it a lack of creativity, players or coach? So it is a lack of creativity, but are the players lacking creativity or is it the coach? And the coach was me. Okay, so if you watch the clip, this is against Holland in America. Players are keeping the ball. Holland have got an organised block. Keeping the ball. Balls into feet. Then the ball ends up off the pitch. Okay. Now, going back to blame the players last, which has been in my nature since I got into coaching, I reflect on that, and at the time, and we won this tournament, by the way. So I'm thinking after this, right, how do I avoid complacency? How do I take the players to the next level and help them? Part of the process, a conversation. So sounds simple, okay? But again, the conversation being purposeful as well, linked to the style of play, linked to why the player is there in the first place. So these sheets here just show, these are based around questions around playing with freedom. So this one here, for example, says, pick one principle and explain what it means to you in your position. So I showed you the principles before. So one of them might have picked outwit your opponent. So what you're doing is you're giving them ownership within a framework, and the framework is around attacking creative football. Excuse me. And then you're asking them to select clips based on their strengths linked to the principle. So if they're picking their strengths based on the principles, say they're picking 3, you're always going in the right direction, same direction, because they're not picking examples that are based on another way of playing. This is the way you're playing. Head coach has got the right to dictate that. And then it's up to the players then to perform, surprise themselves, overachieve, whatever it might be. So this was part of the process. It wasn't all of it. I think there was 2 training sessions. The clips that I show you now are 3 months later, after 2 training sessions, because remember, these boys with their clubs. It's the same players in the clip, ironically. But what you get now is this. Forward pass and a forward run. So this player now is moving ahead of the ball. So you're getting a midfielder running ahead of the ball. There. And now, right back, running in the pitch, because we did a lot of work around playing in the 5 lanes and occupying different lanes. So he now knows that this midfielder has come into his lane, so he now needs to empty it and cross. I call this crossing lanes. And then look at that technique. You get a reverse pass. Well-coached players here. One's from Tottenham, one's from Chelsea. And now, again, goes back to what I said before about intent. I'm praising this at the time. I remember it clearly, because even though we haven't scored, this play has taken a lot of work and a lot of skill for this to happen. Okay? Same in this clip here. Okay, so low block, similar to the first one I showed you earlier on against Holland, where we ended up kicking it off the pitch. Low block. Ryan Sessegnon here on the left. Space in the sky. Bang. And again, we don't score, but I'm praising that because I know we will score from that at some point.
Dan, if I could just ask, so earlier you had a few clips on the defending piece, and a lot were more intercepting than pressing and tackling, for instance, where you're probably looking at the awareness of the opponent's body language and the body movement to try and predict. For these examples in possession, what would you say are the skills that you really home in on when coaching in possession to obviously enhance that creativity?
Yeah, I've got some clips I'm coming on to for that. Is that okay?
Yeah, great.
Yeah. And then if I still haven't answered it, by all means, I'll answer it. But I think I'll answer it when I show these clips.
Just one out of the chat box there, Dan. Just going back to the blame. And Morgan asks, how would you create an environment where players are not blaming other players? So obviously as a coach, you're not, you're putting that last in terms of your thinking, but how do you stop other players, blaming each other?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I think there's a few things. One is we had in our goal setting framework this year at Arsenal, where the players in under our control, the controllables, one of them was around, so I gave them the headings, and the headings are linked to our 4 pillars at Arsenal. So this particular heading was called respectful and humble. And under that, the players wanted one of their controllables to be going from a team to a family. And I think little things like that then give you a really good opportunity as a coach, because as soon as you see the kind of behaviour that you're referring to, you've straight away got an in, because we review the goal setting framework once a month. Around those areas, I can say to them, okay, how would you rate yourself in the past month, a team to a family? And then that gives them an opportunity to say, and you'll get a discussion, which is good. They'll do it in groups and what have you. And then it's an opportunity for them to feed back and say, do you know what, we haven't been as good, because we get them to traffic light system it. So red, amber, green, gold. And they might give it, say, an amber. Okay, why was it an amber? Oh, because there's been a few times when I blame so-and-so when he made this mistake or whatever, and that's not being a family. I could have been more supportive there, etc. That's not helping him. By me criticising him, that's just going to dent his confidence and this, that, and the other. Okay, so how can you take it to a green for next month? Well, if I'm in a similar situation, I'm going to do this instead. And then also, each player for their individual review gets rated and feedback around these 4 pillars, and one of them being around this area. So that's where you can zoom in on the individual. And of course, you can just deal with it in at the time. You can just, I've worked with people who, you create leadership groups. You give somebody the captaincy and you say, I'm giving this to you to help you with your communication skills. I'm going to help you. It might take you a bit of time. Is that okay? And they'll, more often than not, you get a yes. So then they might speak to somebody in a particular way, and you just go up to them quietly and say, how do you think you could rephrase that? How do you think that came across that person? How would it be for you if you were the receiver and it was being communicated to you like that? And remember, we want to play in a certain way, and in order for that to happen, people need to feel like they can without blame. And then obviously you've got to role model it as the adult. When they see you role modeling these behaviours, then you've got an even better chance. And then you do mid-season reviews, you do end-of-season reviews as a group around these areas. So hopefully that's answered the question.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Are there any others?
There's a few more, but I think we'll move on. They'll probably relate to something later on.
No problem. Okay, so what I've just tried to show you here is an example of a process, and when you see a clip where there's maybe a lack of creativity, rather than looking at the players and saying, oh, you know, everything's into feet, we've got no forward movement, oh, he can't do this, don't pick him again for England, he's not good enough. Mate, they might not be good enough, but only once you've looked at all your processes. And I looked at myself, and this tournament in particular, it was 35 degrees heat. So a lot of our play, we didn't really want to risk the ball because we didn't want to be running. And it was very effective for us. So for this tournament, I understood why maybe we didn't have forward runners in this scenario. Because all the goals we scored in this tournament were sort of very possession-based. But then you reflect, you take it back to the lab, as you say, so to speak. And then, like I said, this was after 2 training sessions. You know, more incisive passing, more movement ahead of the ball. Again, I can probably answer some of your question that you asked me about this part. It's all well and good having the movement, but you also need these types of passes, because if he doesn't play this pass here, if he turns out and starts again, then they're more organised. Whereas you need players who can play that kind of pass, and they're going to need physical skills as well as technical skills. Just look at his hips. You know, he's a very agile and mobile player. You know, the right back, the speed to run and to be able to run across the pitch. Because a lot of fullbacks can just run in straight lines, where he's run at an angle. And then obviously on this one, you know, wait a pass here. It's a chip pass, controlling the ball. Again, timing. I mean, a big one for this is positional play, because he's right on the shoulder. He's our widest player in this clip. He's not on chalk. Okay, he's on the shoulder. So his first touch is in front of the goal. Okay, in terms of attacking, I'm just going to look at this thing I call winning moves. Okay, and I'm just going to give you some examples of what I consider to be winning moves. And the reason why I find this powerful is when you build a library of these things, one is good for you as a coach, because it trains your eye when you're watching games, and then when you're coaching, you can see these things in your mind 5 seconds before it happens on the pitch. And then you can help the players with their decision making and being even more effective with the ball. So here's just some examples. The first one's the nutmeg. And again, it's not a circus, but it's very, very effective skill. And it must be, because he does it, and he ain't a bad player the last time I checked, and he does it a lot. Okay, so I'm just going to slow this down. So it's when it comes into him here. Again, look at all these bodies around him. Again, we might look at this and go, he could play this wide. Of course he could play this wide. That's what you're going to get, because you get what you coach. If you want your players to play this pass wide, I haven't got a problem with that. But just so long as you know that's what this player is going to do, that's what they're going to be good at. Okay, what he does is that, and then the rest we can probably guess what's going to happen next. But prior to that, is if he doesn't do this, okay. And like I said, I'm not saying don't play the ball wide. I'm not saying don't do other things. I'm saying as us as coaches, if we want creativity to the highest level, these are the kinds of things we need to think about. Round the corners. Again, let me just turn the sound down. So this is quite old, this game. It's about 5 years old. A ball gets played into there. And again, there's many options here we could do. We can set the ball. He could play into this person to play that through ball. He could play into here to go wide. But he does this. And again, I'm just speaking for myself here. These are the things that I've tried to build a library in my head, that if that's my player, and he doesn't do this, I'm demanding these kinds of things, because look at the centre-backs. That's the last thing they're expecting. They're expecting many things. They're not expecting that. And they score from it. And again, South American. This one here. Back heel. Again, going back to what I said before, these are what I would consider to be creativity. Because when I was watching these for the first time, they're not the sort of things that I would expect to happen. Just me, myself. You might be different, right? So, again, I'll ask the question, how many of us, what would we be demanding of our players here? And expecting of our players? Of this, if we want it. There. Okay, so would we coach this with our players? That you're in this scenario, are we saying hold it up and set it? Are we saying run them down the line and win a corner or cross the ball? Do we put that into their minds? Because not all players will do this naturally. So for me, creativity is them coming up with stuff, but when they don't, then what? Are we going to just accept that's all they can do? Or have we got the toolbox to be able to put these ideas into their head? Couple more. This one I call the lift. So it comes into him here, and he just lifts it there over the defender. So again, this scenario, and the big thing with all these for me is, if our players tried this exact thing and lost the ball, would we persevere and praise intent and understand intent? What were you trying? What were you thinking? Or would we say, just should have played it wide? Or are we telling them what to do before they've even done this action? So are we saying to our player, this precise moment, play it wide, get in the box? And if we do that, again, that's up to you. But just so you know, that's what your players are going to do, because they'll want to please you. If we allow them to make decisions and we've got a specific style of play and environment, you might get this. Overs. Or SIDS, whatever you want to call it. Ball into here. The awareness, there's another skill. To let it run for your mate, bang. Again, unexpected, because if it was expected, the defender wouldn't go with him. But it takes the defender to the near post. There's the finish. Okay. And hopefully the clips that I've shown and the examples I've given have covered a lot of this. And like I said, there's more to this. But with the time we've got, this was the sort of framework I wanted to build the discussion around.
Dan, how would you encourage creativity with players of lower ability? So maybe you're, in a grassroots club rather than an academy setting. Would it be a similar process, or would there be ways that you would look at that?
Same
process.
And it's the same because I've done it. You know, I've gone and taken session. I mean, when I did my interview with the FA, just to give you a little story, it was with a local college, if I remember correctly, and I worked with them in the centre circle. There was 19 of them, and Dan Ashworth told me the story afterwards, that when I started the practice, him and John Peacock were looking at the session thinking, what is he doing? They're never going to be able to play in this area, because they, you know, no disrespect to the players, but they'd seen them play that day. They kind of knew their level, or they thought they did, because within 5 minutes they were playing in this area, no problem. And that was, the story he told me, that they looked at each other a few minutes later and were like, oh my gosh, they're doing it. And I've got Paul Holder to thank for that. Paul Holder at the FA, when I worked with him at Crystal Palace many, many years ago, I was taking my under 10s group, and I asked him to take the session one night, and he put them in a really tight area, 6v6. And, you know, it was a cleverly designed practice, but it was 6v6. And I remember thinking, no way are they going to be able to do this. I've worked with these boys for the last 3 months, not a chance. And I promise you, within 3 or 4 minutes, it was too easy for them, and he was having to make it harder. Why? Because he knew how to manage the environment. He believed in the players. He knew what he was looking for, and I didn't. So, under 10 example there and college team example there, will they be like Messi and Neymar? Probably not. But will they very quickly look like different players and far better players? I believe they will.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, that was a question from Matt, so hopefully that answered that.
No problem.
There's another one in the chat box here from Luke, and he asks, how do you change your approach to creativity if the player and the coach have a different view on what their strength is or super strength is? Does that change anything at all?
I don't think it does. I think if they think their strength is a particular thing, I think you don't try and change them. So I've had a player this year who is and last year, who was a very sort of combative centre half. He's a bit of a sort of growler, like gets everyone motivated, and likes to go up for headers and things like that. And there's nothing, they're all qualities that I'm sure will get him a good career in football. I think what our job is, going back to the brick in the wall, is once we identify what their bricks are, it's us to enhance what their strength is, but then we do that missing 5 or 10%. So with this centre back, for example, I felt he could be more elegant on the ball, shall we say. Mm-hmm. He was maybe too hurried on the ball, didn't want the ball. And a lot of that was either to do with his positioning. He didn't give himself enough time and space. His ball mastery. So we put in place we call it football coordination training with the ball. So we do that pre-training for 30 minutes. And so if you're there before training, it's structured arrival activity with a specialist coach, not me. And then that type of work. And if you get there 20 minutes before the session, you get 20 of it. If you get there 10 minutes before or 5 minutes before, you'll do a top-up at the end, not of runs, of this work. Mm-hmm. Because we want to get into opposition and that competition as soon as possible in the session. So, and now this player, we joke about it. I'll call him Stonesy. So one of the things I've put on here, build a connection. So my little connection with him is about are you going to be John Stones today? Or are you going to be, and I'll mention, a defender that's maybe, just fouls and things like that. And we'll have a little joke about it. And then we got to a point where he would say, I'm going to be John Company. So John Stones, Vincent Company. So he wants to be a blend of the two. Mm. And a year and a half later, he's saying, I feel so much more confident. I can do things that I didn't think I could do. I step into midfield. When it's tight, I swivel out of trouble. but I haven't taken away the other parts of his game, like, because he has to be able to head the ball to have a career.
Right.
So he'll go up for corners, and we've got a lot of creative corners, but I'll still make sure that within those corners, we've got ones where we work it and we whip it into a dangerous area for him to attack the ball. You know, counter pressing is an important part of our style of play. So I'll encourage him to and praise him for going up to win the ball, etc. So I don't think you try and change them, but I think you can still blend them into your style of play without changing who they are.
Brilliant. And how quickly did you start seeing a difference with this player when he was doing a little bit of extra work?
Honestly, I would say 2 weeks.
Wow, that's quick.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable at the start because there'll be some resistance, but you've got to go with your instinct as a coach. And my thing is always with players, I believe in you possibly more than you believe in yourself. You are capable of a lot more than this. You know, when I work with players, I want them to become the best in the world. I don't want them just to become a professional. I don't want them just to be playing the first team. I want them to be the best in the world.
Yeah.
And I tell them that. But because of that, then I can take them to new levels. And they've already told me I want to be in Arsenal first. We're playing. What if you play for England once? Then what? And I'll always try and take their goals higher. You know, why can't you make Arsenal's first team better? Why don't you try and win a World Cup? You know, why don't you try and play 100 games in the Champions League? Yeah. You know, so make them, going back to the example of my cousin, make them think much higher and transformational, as opposed to, for example, you know, I want to be a footballer because I want to change my family's life. Well, why don't you try and transform their lives, not just change it?
Yeah.
You know, so always striving for more, because like I said, our players are capable.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Dan, there's another question here from Sam. I think I touched on it a little bit. How do you find developing creativity in a first team environment? Was there any challenges to this?
I would say the biggest challenge I had was in build-up, so playing out from the goalkeeper, because what I found was you would get players at that level will be thinking a bit more of the what ifs, and obviously the stakes are higher. So yeah, I could play that pass, but if their centre half, who's 6'5", comes and attacks the ball there, we're wide open and it's a 4v3 against us and it's 30 yards from goal. So I would say it was very good for me in terms of I probably started to develop these skills more when I was with England, that rather than just looking at my team and how we want to play, okay, looking at it a bit more broadly, who they up against, what characteristics has that player got that could impact on what we're trying to do. So my compromise was, look, I'm happy for us to get over the halfway line, whether it's 1 pass, 2 pass, 10 passes, provided it's with controlled possession. So I focused a lot of my work on halfway line to the goal. And what I found was, you know, the players, I've never met any players really who don't want to work with somebody who believes in them, but will show that they have the solutions, because we can all talk about we want to dominate possession and we want to be expansive and we want to play free diamond free or whatever it might be. But how are you going to do it? You know, and you've got to be able to convince the players, whether it's in a team meeting on the grass, that you know what you're talking about and it will work. And my first home league game was against Portsmouth, and we created numerous chances from the things we'd worked on in terms of creating 3v2s and 4v3s. And I think once the players straight away see that what you're saying to them opens up spaces and etc., then you've got buy-in. What I should have done more of on reflection was probably have done more afternoon sessions with them, because a lot of those players would have, or some of those players I should say, would have maybe played in styles of play which weren't the same as mine. And as we all know, when they were growing up, they would have been the best player in their club, in their academy, or one of the best. But if you don't use something, so the skills that I've just shown you there, for example, you could be doing all those things in the foundation phase, but if you then don't do them for 1 or 2 months or years, you'll lose those skills. It's like anything. I speak fluent Italian. If I don't speak Italian now for a year, I'm not going to be as good in a year's time. So with those players, I probably should have done more technique work with them in the afternoons. And that's one thing that I think is really important with creativity, is all creative people have a sound technical base. So if you take musicians, for example, they can improvise in that moment during a concert because they've got a sound technical base. They're well rehearsed. I can probably talk about creativity for the next 3 hours because I've been doing talks about it for 10 years. And, you know, I'm passionate about it, and I've researched it and coached it and believed in it since I got into coaching, and I've been around people like Chris Ramsey and coaches of the like who, you know, who have taught me an awful lot. Again, about when I worked with Chris at Tottenham, and I saw the players that he worked with, and I thought, blimey, he's got this player stepping into midfield. He's only been in the building 2 days, and he didn't even want the ball 2 days ago. How's he done that? So, you know, my influences from a coaching perspective have been driven around this. So a sound technical base is important. And maybe, again, I'm not blaming the players in MK Don's first team why we didn't exploit those overloads as well as we should have done. Otherwise, I'd still be there now. I'm blaming myself. If I'd have done more double sessions, would it have worked? Maybe yes, maybe no. We'll never know. We can't turn back the clock. But that's my reflection of one of the few things I would have done differently. Would have been that.
Great. No, I appreciate it. And maybe there's another one, maybe to finish up on, is Niall's asked, if you're responsible for developing coaches' creativity and their delivery of coaching sessions with children, what would be the important things you'd look to do with those coaches?
In terms of taking sessions?
Yeah, so maybe it's more of probably from a tutor perspective, or
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, you want to be in opposition, I would say, for the majority of the time. So it needs to be opposed. Can you get creativity through drill-like practices? I think you can, but I wouldn't do it for long. But I would make it very specific to. So take that. Take this one here, for example. Take this goal here that we just watched. Say you did this in a passing drill. Okay, where you might be as part of a warm up, where you're getting players on the move running, and then the player in the middle is doing that pass, and then you maybe dribble the ball to the other end, or you put it in a mini goal, and then the wave goes the other way. You're planting pictures into their mind within your warm up, so you're connecting with your theme in the warm up. It's not an isolated warm up which has no balls involved, or it's generic. It's linked to what they're going to be doing next and your playing style. But then I think you need to be in opposition. I think the environment that you create will enable it in terms of the rules you put in place. So you might give them more goals if they score in a particular way. Smaller areas, for example, will demand them to have to be creative. being outnumbered. So I've always, up until about 5 years ago, I would always done a possession, for example, with more numbers. Whereas I saw Brazil doing a warm-up about 5 years ago, and it was a 4v6, and the 4 were the one keeping the ball. And I thought, nah, players can't do that. But I started to do attacking outnumbered work, and guess what? They can. They get less success. Okay, so you can't do it for too long because you might dent their confidence, but you can do it for 10, 15 minutes. And when they get success, it's gold dust because it's hard for 5 to break down 7. And then you're asking questions of them of how are you going to do this? And you know, obviously, you see what solutions they come up with. And then obviously you can go in and coach as well. So, you know, lots of things you can do in terms of constraints and the types of conditions you can put on the sessions to enable these things to happen. And the most important thing as well is coach behaviour. You know, you're going to have to observe more and speak less, allow them to make decisions. Going back to that Paul Holder example, when he took that session, that practice, players were making loads of mistakes, and he was going, "Oh, unlucky, well done." And I was thinking, this guy's crazy. But what he was doing was he was waiting for somebody to do something well, but really well. So say if somebody does this in the practice, and then he stop it here, and he would say, "Show us all what you just did and why you did it." And this player would say, "Well, I checked my shoulder and I saw the runner come in, and then I decided to back heel it." "Why did you decide to back heel it?" "Well, because I knew that if I back heeled it, it'd be in 1v1. "That's fantastic. Off you go, everyone. Keep going." And then what you get is peer-to-peer learning. And they start to copy each other. So his method was very much on praising, you know, coaching through praise. And that's important with creativity because you will get a lot of mistakes. So, you know, lots of things you do. I think the important thing is to do it in all areas of the pitch. So not saying, I personally don't use it as it's a final third topic. It's everywhere for me, but that's just my belief.
Brilliant.
And I think as well with coaches, the power of video now, and we're very fortunate at Arsenal that we've got a big analysis department, etc. I know it's not the same for everybody else, but I would still find ways to do it, even if I wasn't at a club like this size. But, you know, we'll put clips on in the change room when they arrive. You know, we're not mentioning the ball mastery stuff. They've got 20-second highlights of them doing these specific moves on huddle. So we'll send them a WhatsApp that day and say, when you arrive today, you're doing the Schneider, the Joe Cole, and the whatever it might be. And they can then on their phones, when they're coming into training, look on huddle and see that. So then when they come already, their brain's been activated, as well as in the changing room, and obviously post-training as well. So I think video now is a really important tool. It saves your voice. They learn, it accelerates the learning. And you can paint pictures.
Brilliant.
People answer that question.
Yeah, no, that's. I think that was a great question to end on. A great answer. Hit a lot of points there, so thank you for that. Just want to say, Dan, thanks for joining us this evening, coming on. We really appreciate your time and putting the presentation together for ourselves and everyone that joined us. Is there a good place for people to look at more work that you've done, or maybe some coaching sessions at all?
I think there's some stuff on the internet. I'll be honest with you, I don't. Since I lost my job at MK Dons, I don't put my name into Google anymore. But no, all joking aside, I think there is stuff on the internet and what have you. But what I would say is, just to finish up on is, I used to get this when I worked at the FA, where people would say, "Can I come in and watch you coach? Can I come in and watch your session?" And I would say, if you want to see me coach, you need to come in for the whole week, because coaching is a series of moments. It's not that 70 minutes 80 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever it is on the grass. It's the hidden stuff. It's the conversations in the corridor. Hopefully I've shown you stuff today. It's my influences. It's the clips. It's the individual reviews. It's the plan. It's all these things blended together. And, you know, that's if I want you to sort of take away any messages today, it's that for me is what coaching is. So even if you did see a session of mine on the internet, it's likely to be you might get one or two things out of it, but it's just a snapshot. You know, it is hopefully you've learnt more about me in this hour than you'd get from seeing a session online, because like I said, we could all Google what Guardiola does in training, but none of us can get our teams to play like it. You know, Barcelona's philosophy's on Google, but no one else plays like Barcelona, because it's that stuff that you can't measure. That's the key. So I would go back to this really in terms of the top line. You as an individual, you know, your personality, your influence, your ethos, that underpins everything.
Brilliant. That's 100% agree. But yeah, again, thank you for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. And if you've not already, follow us on Twitter, the Halftime Review, and we're also on YouTube now. So we have our webinar recordings uploaded on there. If you've missed any, the Halftime Review, you'll be able to find it if you search for that. So thanks again, Dan. It was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, if people didn't mind, I don't know if it's on the chat or what have you, but this is a learning experience for me as well. So if you know, if you're happy to, be nice to know what you might have, if there's anything you've taken from the last hour, and you know how I could have made it even better, would be helpful to me. You know, and hopefully you have got one or two things out of it. But if I was to do this again, is there anything that you want to be wasn't clear, or you think that could have been improved? That would be helpful.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm getting sending some feedback, and we can forward that on to you.
Thank you.
And we can do it that way. All right, brilliant. Thanks everyone. Dan, thanks again, and
Welcome.
weekend. We'll see you all soon.
Thanks very
Take care.
much, Dan.